Hi, my name is Dr. Lisa Kasmer, as I have formally introduced myself, and today I'm going to give some historical context to some of the insulting commentary either myself or other people who have volunteered for various political causes in this upcoming presidential election in the United States have heard regarding women. And much of this comes from Donald Trump supporters, unsurprisingly, given some of the statements he has made about Hillary Clinton and her body parts. And to be clear, I am not making any of these statements because I am a Hillary Clinton supporter. In fact, that has nothing to do with it. When the first person actually approached me and decided to give his opinion that women should never hold power nor have any sort of authority, I took it as a personal insult. And it's clear why. I have taught hundreds, actually probably thousands, of college students over the course of my working career. And these would be in history classes, ranging from lower to upper level, as well as undergraduate basic courses, helped referee a senior thesis, gave some advice and feedback to a teaching assistant, things like this. My authority in a classroom actually has never been challenged, ever. And that may be because I was well versed in my topic. That may be because I have a commanding way of speaking. That is possible. Or they did not seem to think it any different, since many students would be accustomed to having females as teachers from grade school, high school, and onward, that it really didn't matter whether or not it made me easier or more difficult. I can't really say. Have I ever turned in a student for plagiarism? Yes, I have. Have I ever found fault with a student cheating on an exam and reamed them into next week? Yes, I have. Actually, that was more a performance than it was real hostility. And I think I found only as a professional a way to do that appropriately. I thought, frankly, nobody probably ever yelled at this kid like I did. And because I knew how to do it, I thought it would be effective. I know how to raise my voice when it's necessary. I have exceptional hearing. So if somebody is talking in the back of a classroom, I can call them out. This unusual quality has made me very effective and sometimes formidable, actually, as an instructor. Nonetheless, you hear these complaints, and they've even gone to ranging that women shouldn't have the right to vote. And I think this has also been floated a few times on the Fox News channel by a few people who think that this would give their candidates or their favorite flavor of the month some kind of advantage, which may or may not be true. The idea of eliminating portions of an accepted electorate in order to win an election is, frankly, as Bernie Sanders would say, cowardice. So I, for that reason, reject it. I also reject it because to say that I am qualified or not qualified for any position should be entirely based on the merit by which I conduct whatever tasks are necessary to that position. If I cannot do them if I lack the qualifications, then I'm not eligible or I should not be hired. But if I have those, and the only thing I lack is a certain genitalia, then it's wrong. It's arbitrary. And it's arbitrary if you're requiring one form or another. So to say you're voting for one candidate because that person is a man or a woman, to me is wrong. Ipso facto, it's just wrong. It should be about who you think is the most closely related to your own beliefs and who you think would benefit the entirety of the American national interest, which includes the American public, we the people. Okay, that is as far as I'll go along those lines, because nothing else about that matters. For historical purposes, much of female suffrage occurred in the 20th century. Not all of it. Actually, I believe the country of Bahrain only gave women the vote in 2002. And it's still somewhat unclear to me what the status of women voting in Saudi Arabia is. Obviously, the women can't even drive by themselves, so it would seem pretty unlikely that it would be very easy for them to vote. And I think there might have been something about municipal elections. The argument, though, if we want to look at this from a historical perspective, the argument against women having the right to vote was, first of all, about physical force. That a woman cannot support whoever she would choose because she would not have this force to back up whatever vote she casts. Well, any veteran of a war that is maimed probably lacks some physical force. Certainly someone who has a disease such as Dr. Stephen Hawking doesn't really have physical force. I think he has the ability to control one eyelid, which helps him to control a device that gives him the ability to speak. Before that invention, he had lost the ability to speak. So certainly he had no physical force. He had no verbal force. I don't know how he would even vote now. I guess he would somehow wink into something, and that the speech recognition would then turn into somebody pulling a lever for him or writing something down for him. But I am not aware of how he actually casts votes. I don't even know what his party affiliation is, and it really doesn't matter for the purpose of this argument. I can tell you, though, interestingly enough, the first female elected to the British House of Parliament, and as you may know, British history is my main background. Her name was Countess Markievicz by marriage. She was actually Anglo-Irish, and she was voted in while she was in jail. So, of course, the House of Parliament, the House of Commons, did not seat her. The first woman who actually was seated ran for her husband's seat. He became Lord Astor, so he was made a peer of the realm and put into the House of Lords, thus making his seat in the House of Commons up for election. She was also a conservative, and it's been held as something of a theory that the first female of any major political anything is quite often going to be conservative and not rock the boat of the establishment that much, because that's the only way she's going to achieve any kind of high political office. And you could say this and relate it to, say, Margaret Thatcher or somebody like that. Anyway, Her name was Nancy Astor, and here's the great irony. Nancy Astor was actually an American. She was born in Virginia. She was a conservative. She served for a number of years. Some of the great anecdotes of Lady Astor actually relate to her trading barbs with Winston Churchill. Churchill did not like her. And one of the more famous exchanges between them was that Nancy Astor said, "If you were my husband, I would try to poison you." And Churchill replied, "If I was your husband, I'd drink it." So, as you can see, that they didn't quite see eye to eye. And indeed, through much of the 30s, Winston Churchill was not really in the establishment or the elite circle of his party. He was a little bit in the weeds. He was obviously a writer of great repute, and he took time away from not serving to do various other things before essentially returning and then finally leading the British to victory during the Second World War. And his oratory skills are legendary. And you can Google many speech, I'm sure, of his that demonstrate this quite ably. I'm not saying I'm a great Churchill backer. I am not saying I'm a great Lady Astor admirer. I am just reporting these are the facts. Now, so the idea, though, that the right to vote is something that is not ably exercised by women kind of underscores why so many feminists in the 1970s pushed for the Equal Rights Amendment, which would probably put an end, in this country, at least in the United States, to any sort of argument about this issue. Unfortunately, that didn't take place thanks to a whole host of side issues about fear of unisex toilets and other things like this that had nothing to do with the essential idea that being male or female, you're an adult citizen of this country and you should be afforded the same rights or privileges. And it would have nothing to do with how good or bad you looked, or whether or not you were single or married, or how old you were. And in fact, the British, they first only enfranchised women 30 and over. It only took till 1928 until women had the same right to vote as men did. The same, they were on par. There was much debate about how to do this, at least in the British context, and I'm sure this is something that has quite often occurred, as to would a woman automatically vote the way her husband votes, or the way her family votes, or something like that. That essentially enfranchising women would be to give married men or a father or something like that a double vote. And men who weren't married or didn't have children would be at some sort of disadvantage. Again, the idea of infantilizing women underscores this idea that women lack certain attributes. And I've seen this. I have heard of this in people who have told me anecdotes about how they're passed over for jobs and the like, because simply they weren't male. The greatest example was a story somebody told me about a job that required an MBA. And this particular female candidate had the MBA and applied for the job, which would involve a grade change of 1. Instead, a male who was 1 grade below her and hadn't even begun an MBA program got that position. And you have to ask yourself, why? This has its roots in something called the breadwinner's wage, the sense that men should be entitled to earn more than women because women didn't need the money to raise a family. They didn't have the same purpose. And given the way our society is, that many families are two-income households by necessity. And indeed, even in 19th century Britain, this was true to a good extent. I actually found a number of people that I didn't expect would have had married a woman with a career, did in fact do so. One was a surgeon to Queen Victoria herself. I was quite surprised to find out that she had been taking money giving piano lessons for some time. Ultimately, I believe at some point he became successful enough and she had children and she no longer had a sizable or a significant career. But there was aspects of this that certainly, lent itself to her needing and continuing to make money when they were first married, which is something surprising. Certainly as a class issue, women who were of a working class or a lower class always had to work. There was no differentiation about this at all. It was a necessity, whether you were a maid or a prostitute. And God knows there was a lot of those way back then when there weren't significant careers open to women. And that slowly changed in the late 19th century and then into the 20th century, depending on where you're talking about and what type of career you're talking about. Anyway, I just first wanted to talk about this as it related to women having any kind of control or power, and how historically women have come a long way, and what a big step it would be to try to undermine that concept. And frankly, it's as arbitrary as disenfranchising men, or disenfranchising men under, age 25 or something, because they're irresponsible and their brains grow slowly, and they're, less adult-like than women, at age 18. Just to throw out some figure. There's been some discussion in terms of the science of this, that men mature at one point, a different age than women. But essentially, you're an adult at age 18, and there should be no difference. And as such, the idea that a woman is incapable of leading a country or exercising any kind of authority is deeply offensive to me as a historian, as someone who has studied the slow progress of women from, just a few worthies, so to speak, who were, ladies of the manor, who, queens or something like that, who could exercise power. I would love to see this Trump supporter, have an audience with Queen Elizabeth II and say, lady, step down, you shouldn't be queen because, you're one. What do you know? When she's met every single prime minister since Churchill himself. So, and yes, she does actually still have a wee bit of authority. It's more diplomatic than anything else. But there are some instances where her preferences or her advice is sought and then enacted because she has a deep understanding of her country and the history of her country because she's lived it, because she was born in 1926. There's not too many people who are as old as she is and have been able to access as many people as she has, to know as much as she does. She's probably forgotten more than most people have learned. And I frankly think she'll probably live at least as long as her mother did, and her mother lived to be 101. So it wouldn't surprise me if she's still kicking in another 4 or 5 years. Anyway, I will go on to a second topic shortly. Thank you, and peace.